Welcome to Dr. Grimmy's Old-Time Medicine Show and Conversation Extravaganza. Step right up, ladies and gentlemen, and any others. If you have something that ails you, a problem, a challenge, a struggle, we have the cure. Are you bored, disdainful, thoughtful, maudlin, frustrated, or constipated? We have the cure that you have been waiting for. Myself, world-famous Dr. Grimmy, and my faithful and erstwhile assistant, Jake the Snake Garn, Cosmic Serpent, master of hidden wisdom, and owner of copious amounts of inner light. We will teach you, you will learn, and you will be happy. And so, my fine ladies and gentlemen, and others, please step right up. All you have to do is listen. We will sell you the right snake oil. It will cure what ails you, and if nothing ails you, it'll cure that too. We will teach you the secrets of the ages and the esotericness of esoteric. So enter with us now into the inner circle of sacred wisdom. Here you will find what you're looking for.
Welcome to the Dr. Grimmy Show, another Saturday night. Wow, the weather has been warm. Not warm enough to be miserable, but warm enough to be warm. I prefer it. It would be nice if there was a little more breeze and it stayed this temperature the rest of the year. But not going to happen. It's going to get warmer. It's going to get hotter. Today, being as it's kind of the middle of the growing season, we're going to talk about crop circles. Now, this is one of those esoteric topics that get some feedback from the media because they're kind of big and splashy and cool in general. So we're going to talk a little bit about them, talk a little bit about the history maybe, and just in general. I'm not a believer entirely in crop circles as a phenomena, but hey, change my mind. Give us a call, 801-254-1640. This is K-Talk. You can listen to us several different ways. You can listen to us online at www.ktalkmedia.com and click the listen button. We have you can download it from the App Store, a K-Talk Media app that you can play on your phone. We also have a phone stream I've discovered. Last week I mentioned it, but I didn't give you the number. I've fixed that. It's 605-475-1429. You can log in there. You call that number and then play it on your phone, called a phone stream. Rather interesting. So there's lots of different ways. If you can't listen to me in your car driving down the street, I try to tip sacred cows and make heads explode. So it's maybe better to find a different way to listen. K-Talk is putting on a Father's Day giveaway. Now remember, tomorrow is Father's Day. So let's bear in mind we have fathers and we should recognize them. At least those who have acted in our lives as fathers. Log on to www.ktalkmedia.com and on the right side there is a Enter to Win button. We're giving away some interesting stuff. Looks like some Kindle Fires and Herbs for Health, and I think a stay at the Marriott Spring Hill Suites. I'm not sure where it is, but it sounds like it's in a cool place. So enter to win. What does it cost? It doesn't cost anything. And you never know. You might be able to say, look, Mama, I won something. Or you can celebrate Father's Day in a special way at the Spring Hills Marriott Suite. This is an interesting day this summer, June 17th. Looking at the Wikipedia on this day, I found some interesting stuff that I thought we'll talk about. I'll mention. I don't know if anybody's going to want to talk about it, but we'll mention it. Britain's worst maritime disaster occurred this day in 1940 when 3,000 people, I would say soldiers, were killed as a result of the troop ship RMS Lancastria sinking by the Luftwaffe near Saint-Nazaire, France. So it was early in the war, a very powerful day. that's a heavy thing to think about. That whole experience, 1939 to 1945. The three kingdoms. This is a trivia question that you can throw on somebody today. My erstwhile mentor, Larry Freese, might know the answer to this. In what year did the three kingdoms of Denmark, Sweden, and Norway join together into the Kalmar Union? This was under Eric of Pomerania. We're going to make that the trivia question today. But I'm not going to tell you the year. That's the question. What year did this happen? So give us a call. What year did the three kingdoms of Denmark, Sweden, and Norway join together into the Kalmar Union? Because that is a trivia question. I'm going to be surprised if anyone, you might be able to Google it and cheat, but that's okay. At least you'll be doing something. If you can pull it out of your hat without thinking about it, that's pretty cool too. We'll let you do it either way. And I'm not sure what you'll win. We'll have to figure that out. Maybe we can come up to something together. So crop circles. What are crop circles? Well, they're a phenomena that started to occur in England in the 1970s, primarily. There is some evidence that crop circles have been a phenomena. There's a woodcut from 1678 that shows what appears to be a crop circle, has all the earmarks of crop circle. The story on the woodcut says that the farmer was bargaining with an individual to mow his wheat, and the mower wanted more money. And the farmer got mad and says, well, I'll just let the devil mow it. And of course, that's what the devil did. And there's a woodcut showing the devil mowing, but what he appears to be doing is creating a crop circle with all the earmarks. The grain is laid down and that sort of thing. So there is evidence that this kind of thing happened in a long time. I'm guessing Dr. Grimmy says that the mower says, hey, well, you don't want me to mow your grass. Have fun mowing it when it's laid flat on the ground. Because the technology that people have used to create crop circles would fit perfectly in 1678. And it's just as useful today. But we'll talk a little bit about that and what that does. So this crop circle starts showing up. And immediately, one of the earliest theories of crop circles was that it was a weather phenomenon. The crop circle, of course, implies that they are spherical. And so the earliest theories were that there was some sort of weather phenomena that created these spherical circles in the wheat, I want to say man-made growing, fields. You rarely find crop circles, and I don't know if anybody has found crop circles in anything other than ready to mow fields of various kinds, wheat fields, barley fields, that sort of thing. So these crop circles initially in circles, the theory was that some sort of astrological weather phenomenon was causing these. So all of a sudden then they got more complicated. We started seeing 5 circles in the shape of a dice, what you would see on a dice and that sort of thing. And so now it was recognized that perhaps there was a thought of purpose. It wasn't just a random weather event, that there seems to be some sort of intelligent design, if you will, behind the creation of this phenomena. And so then people started coming out of the woodwork. Many of the sites that the original circles in the early 70s and 80s were found were at places that had significance, close to Stonehenge, close to mounds in England that had significance, Salisbury Hill, and such. And so now people started kind of to look for other causations. And immediately glommed onto the idea that aliens and UFOs were coming down and creating these events. Now, that's all they would say, because nobody could really come up with an idea of why a alien, an extraterrestrial would travel millions of light years and just dig in the ground, make a circle in the grass. Don't know. I guess it could make sense. However, that seemed to be the phenomena. There has always been apparently a lot of UFO phenomenon in the area around where these early circles started to show up. And so there immediately became this connection that, okay, if one of those, and we're going to maybe do a whole show on this, the idea of what logical fallacies are. One of the logical fallacies that people use all the time is that if this, then that. If one thing happens, then this will follow. And that is a logical fallacy because it's not the case and it's not testable. It's very unscientific, as the scientists would say, and which is why such a thought is called a logical fallacy. So because, this logical fallacy, as I'm going to call it, that UFOs in the area, therefore crop circles are related to UFOs, is a logical fallacy, because it follows that if one, then another. If one thing happens, then something will follow. So we're going to talk a little bit about that, because it has a lot to do with how people think, and how we look at what we learn. And I think that being able to develop good ways of thinking is part of the purpose of my show. I like to educate. I like to try to make your life a little better than it was before I got here. So, let's do that. So this idea that crop circles and UFOs were connected is a logical fallacy, because there's no physical evidence that connects the two together, other than they seem to occur in an area. They may be related. That's about as far as a strong an argument as you could make for crop circles and unidentified flying objects or extraterrestrial life. Early arguments were that the crop circles were the results of the landing gear of UFOs, which, again, okay, that's as good an explanation as any. I would expect maybe different kinds of things to show up. I would think that perhaps a spaceship traveling zillions of miles would probably be kind of heavy. And so if I have to create the idea of, well, they're made of specialized metal or they use anti-gravity technology, et cetera, if I have to create evidence to support my evidence, then that's another logical fallacy. I can't remember what it's called, but that's what it is. Take my word for it. If you can name it, let me know. 801-254-1640. Now, the funnest part about this entire crop circle story, and I looked at it in prepping for the show, and I found that the Doug and Dave show, a couple of gentlemen in England called Doug and Dave. We're coming up on the break here in just a few seconds. Well, maybe a few more. But and we'll go into and talk about Doug and Dave and their impact on this phenomena of crop circles and what they look like, what they're about. And the reason I kind of wanted to talk about crop circles more than anything else today is I think it allows us to talk about a lot of different things that go on in the world and how we as humans, as people, look at these things, how we argue about them. So after the break, we will talk about the Doug and Dave show.
When the weather's hot outside, cool off with a splash of K-Talk Media, 1640 AM. Oh yeah, now that's refreshing.
Hey Dave, let's tune into the Simply Senior radio show on K-Talk this Saturday. It's at 2 p.m. and it actually sounds really interesting and maybe we can learn something.
I love you, Barb, but I think I'll pass. Besides, it sounds more like geezer radio. I bet it's all about soft foods and spray-on hair. How old do you think I am?
Okay, Dave, let me ask you in a different way. Do you want to listen to a radio show for people who are smarter, wiser, and have more life experiences than everyone else? Yes or no?
On second thought, I'm in.
If you want to join us for the Simply Senior radio show, tune into K-Talk at 1640 a.m. every Saturday from 2 to 3 p.m. See you there, slugger.
The Simply Senior Radio Show is a radio program for those people who are a little bit smarter, a little bit wiser, and have a ton more experience than anyone else.
Men, if you're like me, you appreciate the feeling of a clean, smooth shave from a quality blade. The sort of shave that cuts clean, without the burn. So why are you messing around with generic razors that cost $32 for an 8-pack, when you can shave with Harry's high-quality German-engineered blades for half the price? And if saving money and a clean shave isn't incentive enough, Harry's will give you their starter set, complete with a razor, 3 of their world-famous blades, and shaving cream for just $15. And shipping is always free. We'll also give you $5 off your first order. Our way of saying thank you for trying us. How are we able to save you all this money and still give you the best shave you'll ever enjoy? By owning the factory that manufactures them. That's how. So go to harrys.com right now and enter code 7171 at checkout. That's harrys.com, code 7171.
Kubota's Grand L Series is the ultimate package for outstanding performance and maximum operator comfort. Whether you're mowing, landscaping, or using front-mounted implements, the Kubota Grand L has the versatility, quality, and durability to meet your needs. Right now, get a 6-year warranty, plus 0% APR financing for up to 84 months, or great customer instant rebates. Now through June 30th, 2018. See us or go to KubotaUSA.com for more information.
Find a Kubota dealer near you at GoKubota.com.
You're traveling to another dimension. A dimension not only of sight and sound.
Welcome back to the Dr. Grimmy Show. We're here at AM 1640 K-Talk. You can give us a call, 801-254-1640. If you just got here, we're talking about crop circles with a splash of logical fallacy and some scientific thought and incredulity thrown in. I'm not a big believer in crop circles, but hey, change my mind, 801-254-1640. We talked a little bit about the idea of crop circles showing up in the 1970s and early 80s in England, and we had to look at a couple of individuals that were involved in that process by the name of Doug Bauer and Dave Crowley, Chroorley. They made headlines claiming it was they who started the phenomenon in 1978 using simple tools. Remember, we talked about the woodcut in 1678 and that the tools that were used to make crop circles today are just as valid as they were in 1678. Using simple tools of a plank of wood, a rope, and a baseball cap, fitted with a loop of wire to help them walk in a straight line. They made a circle in front of journalists, a serialologist, which is the title that individuals who apparently call themselves experts on crop circles, who is an advocate of the paranormal explanations of crop circles. Palt Delgado examined the circle and declared it to be authentic before it was revealed that it was a hoax. These two individuals were inspired by Australian crop circle accounts from the mid-60s. Bauer and Chorley, Doug and Dave, claimed to be responsible for all the circles made in England prior to 1987 and more than 200 of them. There were 1,000 other circles, however, that were out there and found and identified that had not been made by Doug and Dave. And so, dun dun dun, it's hard to say. Perhaps there were some actual crop circles out there, but some percentage of them were a result of Doug and Dave. They demonstrated making a crop circle. They, with this idea that you could make crop circles on your own, that it wasn't that complicated, the crop circle phenomena exploded. Now, there were several trains of thought on crop circle phenomena. The one was that it was primarily it was the result of paranormal activity. In other words, activity that would be outside of normal, i.e. UFOs or some other process that couldn't be described. All crop circles seem to have very specific characteristics. That the wheat, whatever the crop was, hence the term crop circle, whatever the crop that the circle was made in, there was a very fine and distinct line between the crop that had been pressed down in the circle versus the crop that was not pressed down. So you get a circle. It was very clear that there had been it was an actual circle. There wasn't any cutoff in the grains. Second of the characteristics is that the circles, that the crop was not damaged. In other words, it wasn't mashed like getting run over by a tire or crushed by something heavy. Many of the crop circle crops that had been made into crop circles continued to grow. They were not damaged enough to influence whether or not they stayed alive. So there's that. There is some evidence. Some of the scientific people looking at this in a scientific perspective have found that the parts that have been bent down have some characteristics. It could be that heat has been applied to the locations where the crop is bent down. And it's not separated, it's not damaged like you would perhaps find if it just got mashed down by a board. Hard to say, though. Doug and Dave were able to create a crop circle that fooled a cerealologist, is the term, an individual who studies crop circles. And there did become a time where farmers would charge money for individuals who wanted to see the crop circles. And it became somewhat of a business to a great extent. And so perhaps enterprising young souls would make money for farmers by making crop circles, because apparently it's not very difficult. And there's been several times when this has actually happened. In 11 and 12 July 1992, there was a crop circle making competition with a 3,000 pound in England. Basically produced by the best winner. The one that won the contest was a bunch of engineers using rope, PVC pipe, and a plank and some string, a telescopic device, and two-step ladders. So again, we're right in with 1678 technology. We haven't done anything special, no ray guns, no ray beams, no apparent UFOs yet. And so this is the Discovery Channel did a series on this and had some kids from MIT create some crop circles trying to duplicate the features claimed for what are considered real crop circles versus the known fakes. And they were able to pull that off without too much trouble. It's interesting that when now we find commercial crop circles, we've seen Coca-Cola crop circles, we've seen the Summer Olympics was advertised by crop circles and the Olympic rings. And if you look at, and I'll have to ask you to Google it, and just look at crop circle photographs. the latest and greatest. I mean, they seem to increase in complexity over time. In fact, one of the threads of belief that's going on now is that this process of crop circle making is following mathematical laws, and that they can be decoded and read. And several people are out there on YouTube primarily arguing that they can decipher the meaning behind crop circles. And of course, they all are, let's guess what they are, what they could possibly be messaging, and they are generally the end of the world, the change of the climate, all of those things that we are currently fearing ourselves. So what is it about? Let's look at this from a continuum. Let's say on one side of the continuum, crop circles are always man-made. In other words, there's no paranormal activity involved in the creation of these circles. And let's go a little bit farther on the continuum and say, okay, we have some human-made crop circles, but there are others that are, let's call them legitimate, perhaps, crop circles that do have a paranormal, that how they're created cannot be explained in a reasonable, measurable way. So I would say that I would first follow the idea that they're all made from humans and the technology is easily available. And what I think has happened has been human nature. And this nature is that they grab the idea, it has to be bigger, better, and brighter than what it appears to be. It can't be something so mundane as humans. And we blame aliens. I mean, it seems we blame aliens for everything. Eric Van Dyneken, the writer of Chariots of the Gods, blamed the aliens for everything. Even though scientists have looked at his claims are, they stretch the credulity, I suppose. But people like to have their credulity stretched. And so he's made a lot of money doing that. I think the same process has occurred here in the crop circle phenomena, that people started making crop circles. They were unusual, they were different. And what we find is that whenever something is that, people glom onto it. People want to make this simple activity bigger than it is. And so you get a bunch of people who start looking at it, and after they've looked at it for a while, they become experts, and they have the authority based on their looking at it for the longest period of time. And they become seriologists. And other people take their statements at face value that this is a paranormal event. I'm a believer in Occam's razor, that the simplest explanation is probably the most accurate. And so the simplest explanation for crop circles is that people can create them using very simple 16th century technology. And what we find is that as people have continued to make crop circles, they've gotten better and better at it. And what we see is today you see very, very complicated crop circles with lots of mathematical stuff, and I don't, just because it has mathematical implication does not mean it's alien. Humans are capable of thinking about math. And so we see a lot of crop circles now that are very, very complicated, into where we now have another level of belief going on, that there's some sort of messaging going on, that the reason they're getting more complicated is that the messengers are trying to import a more complicated message or be more urgent about their message. Always, something simple always has to be bigger than it is. So I don't know what to say about crop circles, other than a lot of what has gone on within the belief and history of this, and because it's a recent phenomenon, the last 40 years or so, we can apply some observation skills to this practice and phenomenon, and can make some educated guesses, make some hypotheses about them. It would seem that, we have this woodcut showing what appears to be a crop circle in the 1678. And very easily could have been, the mower who didn't get hired, which was the basis of the story, could have gone back and just pulled a fast one on the owner of the field. Being as it was 1678, it's you could probably get burned as a witch for doing such things. But that's another logical fallacy, that if something, one thing might lead to another. If UFOs happen in the location of crop circles, then UFOs and crop circles are related. That is a classic logical fallacy, and it doesn't stand up to any kind of observation or evidence. Now, there have been claims of people who say that a mist came down and a crop circle appeared. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. So that's Carl Sagan saying. The guy had like 10 doctorate degrees, so I'm going to go with Carl on this one and say that if you're going to make that extraordinary claim, you need better evidence to convince me to accept it. It's not that I'm not open to being convinced, or that I have a closed mind. I just need to be, my mind has a lock, and reason and evidence is the key. I don't want to open my mind so much that all my brains drain out. And that's a challenge. That's what happens, I think, particularly in what they call the New Age movement, this newer view of spirituality and belief, that almost anything that is said is accepted at face value, irregardless of whether or not it is a logical fallacy or has no evidence to support it. So we'll have to see at that. But then again, change my mind. I'm not a big believer in crop circles. Change my mind. 801-254-1640. Let's see. We had a discussion on the moon landing. I believe that the moon landing happened, but there was some argument brought up that made it very, some very powerful, consistent discussion on that left, some strings dangling, but not many. I was able to go back and look at some of the stuff, some of the claims. But I had to, and that's the difference between some belief systems and a scientific belief system, is that science, if the evidence shifts, if the evidence is disproven, or the test of the evidence changes, in other words, you can't replicate the results consistently, then a scientist, or good scientist, will say, okay, I was wrong. And I have to go back to the drawing board and come up with a better hypothesis, a better theory that the evidence supports. That doesn't happen in other kinds of belief. That doesn't happen in a religious world. Religious belief does not base itself on evidence and will not change, irregardless of whether or not any evidence is changed. There is a movement in the community of the United States about where they want to teach what I would call religious science. The term is creation science, I suppose, because that seems to be the biggest argument, is that the story of creation in the Bible is taken literally, and creationists, individuals who believe in creation science, want to be able to argue it, put the lipstick on a pig and call it science, when in reality, if the science shifted, if the data and evidence that was available changed, that said there was a different theory to support the facts, a creation scientists would not change their premise. And that by itself says that it is not science and should not be presumed to be science, because science, if the evidence and reality of the evidence and its ability to be tested changes, scientists will change their theory. Come back after the break. Give us a call, 801-254-1640.
The sun's finally out, so get out there and enjoy. And don't forget to bring along the refreshing sound of K-Talk Media, 1640 AM. Did you know that at least 50% of women and 30% of men are wearing the wrong size shoe? Have you ever thought to yourself, I love the style, but I definitely can't wear these shoes all day? Do you find yourself in that constant internal argument between style, comfort, and fit? SAS Shoes at 8922 South, State Street in Sandy understands how important a really well-made pair of shoes can be. And this family-owned American company has a dedication to quality and detail that ensures that no matter the SAS shoes you choose, they will be the best made, best fitting, and most comfortable pair of footwear in your closet. Come see us at 8922 South, State Street in Sandy. You know you need a new pair of shoes, and now they're more affordable. SAS on the corner of 90th South State Street, open Monday through Saturday, 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. Come in to feel how comfortable a new pair of shoes can be.
Hey Dave, let's tune into the Simply Senior radio show on K-Talk this Saturday. It's at 2 p.m. and it actually sounds really interesting, and maybe we can learn something.
I love you, Barb, but I think I'll pass. Besides, it sounds more like geezer radio. I bet it's all about soft foods and spray on hair. How old do you think I am?
Okay, Dave, let me ask you in a different way. Do you want to listen to a radio show for people who are smarter, wiser, and have more life experiences than everyone else? Yes or no?
On second thought, I'm in.
If you want to join us for the Simply Senior radio show, tune into K-Talk at 1640 a.m. every Saturday from 2 to 3 p.m. See you there, slugger.
The Simply Senior Radio Show is a radio program for those people who are a little bit smarter, a little bit wiser, and have a ton more experience than anyone else.
Attention all authors. Page Publishing is looking for authors. Have you written a book and want to get it published? Page Publishing will get your book into bookstores and for sale online at Amazon, Apple iTunes, and other outlets. They handle all aspects of the publishing process for you. Printing, cover art, publicity, copyright, and editing. Call 800-501-3689 now for your free author submission kit. That's 800-501-3689 for your free author submission kit. Again, 800-501-3689.
Howdy, folks. I'm Colonel Sanders. When I told folks my signature KFC pot pie was filled with delicious Kentucky Fried Chicken, veggies, and topped in a golden flaky crust and only cost $3.99, they said I was crazy. And maybe I was, because that was 1980, and $3.99 was a lot of money back then. But today, getting a meal that size for just $3.99 is a really great deal. So stop into a KFC and get yourself a pot pie. It's finger-licking good. At participating KFCs for a limited time. Prices may vary. Tax extra.
Welcome back. Welcome back. So we've been talking tonight about crop circles. And we're discussing maybe some logical fallacies along with it. I'm not a big believer in crop circles as a paranormal, esoteric phenomena. And I just have not been convinced of their efficacy as such by what little research I've done. But hey, changed my mind. 801-254-1640. K-Talk's doing a Father's giveaway. Log into www.ktalkmedia.com and click on the Enter to Win. Put in your information, and you could win some Kindle Fire, a stay at the Spring Hill Suites Marriott, and something called Herbs for Health, which, you know, we all need a little bit of health. I certainly do. One thing going on that I think is kind of interesting is something called FireCon, Burn Your Own Creative Path, June 21st through the 23rd. It's at Weber University. It is a science fiction and fantasy learning conference on art, writing, and games. It's the College of Engineering and Applied Science and Technology. They're going to present a bunch of stuff. They've got a guy, David Farland, an award-winning best-selling author, The Rune Lord, Star Wars, and the Mummy. Christy Craig and C.C. Hunter, another young adult paranormal romance author. Dr. Charles Cannon, award-winning Nebula finalist, which is kind of the Oscars of science fiction. Charles Quinn Yarbrough, a professional writer of over 40 years. In 1997, the Transylvanian Society of Dracula bestowed a literary knighthood on Yarbrough, and in 2003, the World Horror Association with the Grand Master Award. Only been a couple of those given. They're kind of a cool thing. David Hauer, a screenwriter and the writer for Galaxy Quest, Bizarro Superman, and Trek the Movie. So, something interesting to do. Might find something esoteric on that. So, sure. Let's go back to what we were talking about. Now that I got some of the Abramotizing out of the way. Crop circles. Now, we talked about the Doug and Dave show. These two gentlemen, these two guys, one guy got the idea of seeing crop circles in Australia in the mid-'60s, came back having a beer with his bud, and they decided to go out and make some crop circles and had a good time and really started a craze, if you will. The believers came out of the woodwork, and we get these trains of thought that they were created by UFOs because there were lots of UFOs seen in the area, and since UFOs are in the area and crop circles are in the area, therefore UFOs and crop circles were considered to be related. That is a logical fallacy. It is not a way of thinking, and it's not a logical way of thinking, and I say shame on you for thinking that way. So while we kind of bumped into logical fallacies, let's look at some of them. What they this is your argument is invalid. It's a website that talks about this sort of thing. Personal incredulity, saying that because one finds something difficult to understand, it's not true. You see that a lot. You can't explain it clearly. It must not be real. Giving the burden of proof, saying that the burden of proof lies not with the person making the claim, but someone else. That, hey, it ain't up to me. I'm just telling you, that guy has to come up with the proof. It's not. One of the more common, and you see this used all the time in common media in today, is what is known as, in Latin, the ad hominem attack. Attacking your opponent's character or personal traits instead of engaging with their argument. Now, an argument has a premise. I say this is true, and then evidence to support that premise. And if I make a premise saying, hey, this is true, and this is why I believe it's true, A, B, C, D, and instead of saying, well, C is a little flimsy, and I don't believe A, instead of going to my argument, they say, yes, but you're just a poofter. You are not a real smart guy. You can't come up with that thought. Attacking the person making the argument, not the argument itself. Presuming that because a claim has been poorly argued or a fallacy has been made, that the argument is wrong. Just because somebody can't argue effectively doesn't mean they're wrong. Something to think about. If you have an open mind and you think scientifically, not hard to do. Misrepresenting the straw man, misrepresenting someone's argument to make it easier to attack, exaggerating, misrepresenting, or just completely fabricating someone's argument. Now, gee, I've never seen that happen before. Wait a minute, yes I have. Pretty much anytime I turn on the news. It is much easier to present your own position as being reasonable or valid, but this is kind of dishonesty. It just undermines any kind of rational debate. Here's an example. After Will said that we should put more money into health and education, Ward responded by saying that he was surprised that Will hates our country so much that he wants to leave it defenseless by cutting military spending. Changing the argument to make it easier to attack. The straw man, a logical fallacy. So these are just some examples. There's about 40 of them that scientists and smart people try to avoid. And we're talking about crop circles, which is a premise that says circles in crops that are made, and the primary argument being made in the community is that crop circles have a paranormal source. So, since that's the premise. Crop circles are created by a outside of the normal cause. UFOs, witches, weather, strange weather, whatever the case may be. That's the premise. Now, what you would expect is a person to say, okay, the evidence I have of that is that, we can see the landing strut marks on the ground where the UFO landed. We can see the heat has damaged the grass. We have 14, 15, 16 witnesses that, when separately interviewed, all gave the same pieces of information. Those are my evidence. And then another person could say, well, I disagree. Was all of the witnesses, were they interviewed separately, effectively? Was your, what are you calling landing grid? It doesn't appear that if you looked at it from an engineering perspective that something so big could be held up by a hole so small, et cetera, et cetera. That's a scientific, well, even if it's not scientific, it is certainly rational. And that's what I want to see a little bit more of. And I love talking about esoteric things, and I don't disagree or disbelieve all esoteric things. But I do expect that if someone makes extraordinary claims, that they had better put up some extraordinary evidence. And I rarely see that in the community of paranormal research. Lots of claims, not a lot of evidence. And so, if that's the reality, I have to kind of consider, well, without the evidence, it's only interesting. Now, that's the beauty of this show, is I don't need a lot of evidence to talk about stuff that's interesting, because I'm not trying to convince you to believe the way I believe or to change how you believe. I just want to talk about stuff that's kind of interesting. So here's something that's interesting when it comes to crop circles. One of the threads of argument, one of the things that's stated about crop circles is that they are made in such a way that they are sending messages from aliens, from higher beings, from spiritual entities. There's lots of thought behind who is sending the messages. And there is some thinking about what the messages mean. And there's lots of different views on interpreting the crop circles. The one that struck me as the most interesting, which I would argue perhaps is the least scientific, but is that the person said that you look at the crop circle, whether or not it's a circle, and that seems to be the case. That many of these have grown in complexity to where they are no longer just circles. So crop circles perhaps is a misnomer, but these crop things are much more complicated. And you look at them and you try to feel and see and observe and look at what that image means for you, and then that you can go for and maybe apply as a predictive or as a measure of what this message might be. Now, that kind of caught me as interesting because Dr. Jung, the famous psychoanalyst, made the same argument about when interpreting dreams, that dream symbols are not entirely universal, though there are archetypes, but that the imagery espoused by those archetypes are unique and individual to the person who's having those imageries. And they are only valid for that individual in relation to how the individual perceives them. And so this person was kind of arguing to look at these crop creations, crop circles, from that perspective, is that what does this symbol mean for you what does it draw from you in your thinking about it? Now, I don't know if the Jungian archetype is necessarily going to be a predictive for as a valid measure of crop circles and why they're made. I don't know if on the far side of the continuum where it's only humans making crop circles, that they perhaps even thought of there being Jungian archetype or messages to be delivered, other than that as an artist trying to connect with, connect as an artist is trying to connect. This individual goes further and says that you can then take that meaning and apply it in a larger, since they argue that this is a worldwide phenomenon and that it is for the world as a whole, that any meaning should be applied to the world as a whole. And so he gets some kind of off-the-map sorts of predictions on events that occur. I'm not buying it. You could Google YouTube, crop circles predictions, and you'll find just how deep a rabbit hole the human psyche can be. Interesting. I'm not sure if I'm going to set my clock by what a crop circle or creation is telling me. Which goes back to this idea of the way we as people look at and determine truth. Many of us apply and try to determine truth based on how it feels. If it feels good, it's true. And that makes sense to to a certain, if I'm eating something and it doesn't taste good, then I'm not going to eat it anymore, and I'm going to make a claim that didn't taste good, and I'm not going to eat it anymore. Perfectly scientific. However, somebody else may have an exact opposite response. How they feel in regards to eating something may be entirely different, and neither one of us, it's subjective. It's based on our own individual preferences, not universal constants or standards. So we could make a universal statement that the reason I like cherries and it tastes like cherries, or I don't like tomatoes and it tastes like tomatoes, and somebody else can have a subjective I like it anyway. Anyway, we'll continue on this line of thought. Give us a call, 801-254-1640. If you believe in crop circles and think they predict the future or are made by UFOs, change my mind.
Welcome to Dr. Grimmy's Old-Time Medicine Show and Conversation Extravaganza. Step right up, ladies and gentlemen, and any others. If you have something that ails you, a problem, a challenge, a struggle, we have the cure. Are you bored, disdainful, thoughtful, maudlin, frustrated, or constipated? We have the cure that you have been waiting for. Myself, world-famous Dr. Grimmy, and my faithful and erstwhile assistant, Jake the Snake Garn, Cosmic Serpent, master of hidden wisdom, and owner of copious amounts of inner light. We will teach you, you will learn, and you will be happy. And so, my fine ladies and gentlemen, and others, please step right up. All you have to do is listen. We will sell you the right snake oil. It will cure what ails you, and if nothing ails you, it'll cure that too. We will teach you the secrets of the ages and the esotericness of esoteric. So enter with us now into the inner circle of sacred wisdom. Here you will find what you're looking for.
Welcome back. This is the Dr. Grimmy Show with Dr. Grimmy. Hey, we're talking about crop circles, and we trundled into the deep grass of logical fallacies and how we think as humans, how we view evidence, and how we come to understandings of truth. With that said, I'm going to give you some information, and you can test these theories. K-Talk, www.ktalkmedia.com, is putting on a Father's Day giveaway. Go to that website and click on the Enter to Win. I'm guessing the last day will be tomorrow. You'd stand to win some Kindle Fires, Herbs for Health, and a stay at the Spring Hill Suites Marriott. The Weber State University is holding a science fiction and fantasy learning conference on art, writing, and games. That'll be, I'm sure, at Weber State University. So give them a call. I don't have a contact information on this press release. However, I'm sure on their website for Weber University you could find out anything you needed to know if you're interested in doing that sort of thing. And you can listen to us on the air as we're doing it, Legacy Radio. You can get a hold of us by phone. You can dial the number on your phone and then play it on, you can phone stream, as it's called. Area code 605-475-1429. Or you can click the listen button online. We also, most of the hosts will record their shows and put them in our archive section. We also have SoundCloud, where you can click and listen at your convenience, whichever show, hopefully mine, that you want to listen to. So let's get back at it. One of the reasons I'm interested in this phenomenon of crop circles is that it demonstrates the way that human beings grab onto ideas and propagate them and try to come to, create value systems for those ideas and how they get spread out into the human community. Because I think this applies to a lot of things, particularly in this paranormal community. And I've said before that I'm trained as an anthropologist and a folklorist. And so I'm very interested in how people tell stories and why, and how a story has a beginning and how it ends up on the other side of a period of time as a completely different story or as the exact same story. It just, it very well much depends. It's kind of like the game telephone. If you ever remember playing that, you'd be sitting in a circle and somebody'd whisper in the ear, and then everybody would go around the circle whispering in the ear of whatever was originally told them, and it'd go around the circle, and by the time they got to the end of the circle, what was started at the one end of the circle was completely different from what was said at the other end of the circle. And that is an absolute truth in how human beings' information gets passed on. And so when we talk about Doug and Dave, these two Brits who had a few beers at the pub and decided to go out and make crop circles, and then they generated this enormous interest in these crop circles and in how they were made and created, because human beings always want to know why. And so that seems to be the first question that we ask. But then the challenge comes is the answers that we give, and in the case of crop circles, why got answered by UFOs. Other answers were that it was the Fae. I did a show on the little people, on the Fae, on the magical people who live kind of off the grid, if you will, and that the Fae, these were fairy circles. They were power, created to designate areas that were important to the little people, was one thread. Primarily, and the one that's most broadly out there, is that it is a UFO phenomenon, that there is an alien intelligence attempting to communicate with us, and that we have to learn how to interpret and understand these symbols that are being created in order to understand the messages. And then there are enormous amounts there's lots of threads of ideas of how what those interpretations should look like. Some of them, one example I gave was on a Jungian archetype. What does this symbol mean to you individually, and then apply that to in a worldwide sense. And others use mathematical formulas. Some of those formulas we bump into when we look at the Pythagoreans. We look at some of these other esoteric number systems, because that's where they're looking to find answers, is in the occult, in the hidden, in the esoteric. And we run with that when we try to answer the why. When in reality, what we could be is just the boring Doug and Dave going out with 16th century technology of a rope with a board and a straight line and a few beers in you, and you have fun and you enjoy the summer night, and you create something that generates a response, and more importantly, it's artistic. You literally have to do effort within a context and create something that wasn't there before, that can be interpreted by others with any kind of meaning. I mean, that's my definition of art. And so now we have crop circles or crop creations, if you will, all over the world, all over the place, and they are in increasingly complicated forms. And we even have found that commercial industry has taken up the cause, if you will, and created crop creations, crop circle-like creations with Coca-Cola, Coke bottles, and other, Olympic rings and things that are created in a farmer's field, where the crops are pressed down with this 16th century technology. And we find, we have a written evidence that crop circles probably occurred as early as 1678. And the story was that the farmer was paying someone to mow and it wasn't a lawnmower, it was a scythe, would cut his wheat and would charge him a fee for doing that. Now remember, in 1678, post-Black Death, 20% of Europe had died, so there wasn't a lot of individuals who were competing for the opportunity to mow someone's lawn, and the mower, it was a workers' market. They could demand pretty much whatever they wanted. And when he was denied, he said, well, the devil can mow it. Well, he did. The devil mowed the lawn, smashed his wheat down. So if it's smashed down, not damaged, smashed down, because that would be maleficarum, then it wouldn't be able to be mowed by another mower if he hired somebody else. At least that's how I'm going to look at it. I'm on the range of this continuum of belief that crop circles and crop phenomena, crop art, is human-made, and there is no paranormal connection to it. But hey, if I'm wrong, let me know. 801-254-1640. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that subject. We do have in Utah, we have dry wheat. You just plant it and let it grow. You leave it alone. We don't need it. You don't have an irrigation system that functions. So it is a popular crop in Utah because you don't need an irrigation system, though you are at the foibles of weather and rain. And I wonder if any of these dry wheat farmers have had crop circle impact. It's a good way to get shot in this country because the margin for this sort of thing is in the pennies. And so damaging a wheat crop could certainly get you, someone could consider using deadly force to protect their wheat crop. But I don't know if it's occurred here in the West. There have been activity in the United States, but it's low. It hasn't happened all over the place. It hasn't been as popular as it was in Europe. England has a lot of places that have other significance, not just the fact that they're farms, but we have, the normal stone circle things going on. Circles seem to be a very common motif. And so I don't know if we have the same sort of thinking about the land here in the United States that perhaps in England people might have in this idea of creating art this way. I know when I'm flying over the Midwest, I'm flying over flyover country, as they say, and you're looking out the window, because that's the funnest part of flying, is looking out the window, and you see all these farms and the irrigation. You can tell where they've been irrigated because of the streaks of green and the circles of green and just the way the land is. You can get a keen sense of what it is and what it's doing and where the water's going. I haven't seen any crop circles myself. I'm sure that there are pictures of them and that sort of thing, but I don't know if it's a phenomenon in this country as it is in Europe or as it has been in Europe. I think we have some people are a little more, most farms are industry farms and perhaps are more secure than simple private farms, so maybe that thwarts a lot of the artistic motivators that seem to be the case these days for making crop circles. But more importantly, I wanted to, the idea of crop circles and how they're believed in some cases is based on what are called logical fallacies. And I've kind of been bouncing between the two sides, talking about a paranormal, esoteric event, and then bouncing over into the logic and scientific application of thought. Because I think there is some truth within a paranormal frame, what is known as a paranormal frame. And it would be important that when we look at things that are hidden, when we look at things that are occult, when we look at things that are esoteric, we should have the willingness to apply logic and scientific observation, because I think it's important that if a phenomenon doesn't stand up to a test of scientific value, in other words, that if it's not a common test that scientists use to test other hypotheses, I'm not sure what the plural is. If you know, give me a call, 801-254-1640. And we could put it to rest and say, okay, this is a subjective view of a phenomenon, but it's not scientific. And that matters. We're going to come back on the other side of the break and talk a little bit about more logical fallacies and how people think when they look at trying to determine what truth is. See you on the other side.
When the weather's hot outside, cool off with a splash of K-Talk Media, 1640 AM. Oh yeah, now that's refreshing.
A good night's sleep is the most important part of your day, and that firm mattress that sags more than your grandma's 50-year-old lazy chair is not giving you the rest you need. Affordable Mattress Outlet has you covered at a price you can afford. Save up to 75% on name brand mattresses, like a wireless adjustable base bed with massage for $6.99, or a queen pillow top mattress starting at $159. No credit and zero down. Visit the store at 8969 South, 1300 West, affordablemattressut.com, or call 801-917-4555.
I don't mean to brag, kid, but I'm a pretty healthy guy. Running a growing business means I'm always running. Not many can keep up with me. But you know who can? Grainger. When it comes to getting me the answers I need right when I need them, Grainger moves just as fast as I do. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. They're a good running partner, because no matter what problem I have or question, Grainger's got my back. Call clickgrainger.com or stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
Project Rushmore. In the lore of Harley-Davidson, it's a tribute to the power of 4 young men who built this company. Proof that 112 years of innovation breeds a soul that roars. Because the Harley-Davidson Project Rushmore motorcycles are monumental power. With high-output twin-cam 103 engines and touchscreen infotainment for navigation and communication, power is everywhere you look, hear, and feel. Take a Road Glide Special on a power trip at your Harley-Davidson dealer.
Take on your toughest jobs with a tractor you'll be proud to own. A Kubota B-Series tractor. The B-Series is simple to operate yet amazingly powerful. They can handle anything from light construction and nursery work to small farming projects. Right now, you can get financing as low as 0% APR for up to 84 months. Or great customer instant rebates when you buy a Kubota B-Series tractor. Now through June 30th, 2018. See us or go to KubotaUSA.com for more information.
Find a Kubota dealer near you at GoKubota.com.
Welcome back. So we're talking about crop circles today, and I've kind of slapped them around a lot. We talked about the Doug and Dave adventure, where they basically decided to make crop circles and did, and then made some crop circles for the media, and then had a seriologist come out, which is the title for individuals who believe they're experts in crop circles, and he claimed it was legitimate, and then he was told that it was fake. And so there's been a lot of in the literature and discussion of crop circles, this how do you determine a hoaxer or a creator of a human-made crop circle versus a legitimate crop circle based, with a crop circle that would fit within the paranormal side of the argument. Now remember, there's the continuum. One side is that humans make crop circles, and then kind of the other side that says that crop circles are made by humans, sure, but there are legitimate crop circles made by UFOs or aliens or some other force, the Fae, the weather, electromagnetic energy, things of that nature. So the question then is which side of this continuum does one find themselves on? I lean more to the humans making crop circles. Based on Occam's razor, the simplest explanation is generally the most accurate. And that's what we find, is that we find that over time the crop circles have become more complicated, and we've gotten to the point now where even commercial artists are being paid to create crop circles for various interests, such as the Olympics, Coca-Cola, and that sort of thing. So I have strong evidence, on my premise that humans are the originators of crop circles, and I can give, examples of that occurring. So on the other side of the continuum, saying that crop circles are also made by, certainly they're made by humans, but we have this type of crop circle that's legitimate, that's made paranormally by aliens, the Fae, electromagnetic power, the weather, whatever. And so then we have to ask ourselves, okay, what is the evidence that makes this work? Because the evidence has to match the physical facts. So some of the things that seriologists, as they call themselves, have made is that a legitimate crop circle has some specific characteristics. And one of those characteristics is that the definition between the crop that has been flattened, and when I say crop circle, that's what we're looking at, is a crop, so an organized growing pattern of plant, and wheat and barley, and all of these are victims and can be used. And within, there's a portion of them that are laid down flat in a spiral sort of look, and that these circles initially, and the reason they're called crop circles is some of the original discoveries of these were circular. But they quickly became more complicated, multiple circles that are connected to each other. And then we start to see, geometrical fractology, where the mathematics of the circles can be predicted on a mathematical formula, primarily the fractal. And so they get more and more complicated over time, to where what we find now is what are essentially very artistic creations. And I think that is primarily what is going on from my perspective, from my viewpoint, is that individuals are creating this as acts of artists to create images that have meaning outside of themselves for others. And but from the other side of the continuum, we have this idea, okay, if a certain percentage of crop circles or crop creations are made by paranormal events, how is that happening? And that question hasn't been answered. There are characteristics of what are called legitimate crop circles, but still no real definition of how it is occurring. So some of those characteristics are that with this very fine, definite line between the crop that has been pushed down or laid down or swirled and the crop that has not. There's no, it's either one or the other. There's no half-mashed, half put down crops. The bending, where the crop bends, there is it appears scientifically from some of the tests that have been done that where the crop is bent, there appears evidence that heat of some kind was applied. Perhaps microwave energy is the argument. And that none of the crops that are pushed down in a legitimate circle are damaged to the point where they do no longer grow. And so a legitimate crop circle will continue growing even if it has been, and that in a non-traditional crop circle, you would find some portion of the crop that had been pressed down to be damaged enough that it would not grow anymore, that it would not be able to function as a plant. And so that's a marker for a legitimate circle. Beyond those two arguments, there isn't a lot more of what a legitimate crop circle, or when I say that, a paranormal created crop circle or crop creation would be. There have been witnesses who say that a mist came down and then when the mist lifted, there was a crop circle. Anecdotal, it's people telling a story. And so if I were able to interview them separately and get the same story, maybe I could give that some weight. From my perspective now, all I can say is that individuals have said that. There have been people who say they saw them created, that they watched them being formed. What you find when an individual makes that claim, you do find the logical fallacy of the ad hominem attack. Individuals who disagree with this or disagree with the paranormal explanation of the creation of crop circles will use ad hominem attacks against those kinds of individuals. And if you really want to know what an ad hominem attack looks like, just go and find an individual making an extraordinary claim and then look at the arguments against that, and any of them that attack that individual directly in some manner, whether it's their truthfulness or their capability or their education or whatever it is, that is a logical fallacy, and that is an ad hominem attack. And so look for those logical fallacies as we look for when people make claims. You can see that the enemy of that idea of paranormal creation isn't using a logical thought he's not approaching the argument, he's just attacking the person. And I don't think that serves any useful purpose because it's not it doesn't debunk anything. It doesn't validate anything. It just prevents a discussion from being made. Because if it turns out that this is just if we can't find evidence of it being a paranormal, if we cannot find evidence that on this continuum that the paranormal creation of crop circles doesn't have enough evidence to support it, and we have to accept the idea that crop circles and crop creations are made by people, then when we look at them, we can say, wow, what a great creation. It doesn't have to be alien to be wonderful. I mean, that's everything has to be unusual. It's like we're boring. I think humans are very capable of making powerful and creative things without any help from aliens. And so let's give credit where credit is due and recognize, instead of saying, well, no, but you couldn't do that. I had to have been an alien. To me, that would be if I was an artist and I had gone through the work, that would have been insulting in a way for me. That's just me. I'm not very artistic. I draw great stick people. So We'll leave that at that. So, why would, when we look at the science of space and UFOs and aliens, because that kind of seems to be the fundamental argument of crop circles, is that they have a UFO connection, an alien extraterrestrial connection. Why would a entity, a intelligence of some kind, come to this earth and only draw in the grass? I mean, if you want to get everybody's attention, land on the White House lawn and take Trump and fly away. Because everybody's going to either be really pissed off or they're going to be really happy. But everybody's going to be paying attention. So I'm not sure why, if there is messages that are being given by aliens that are what is argued they are important, that they have this import of the future of the planet, and we have to learn and decode them so we can understand. If the messages are that important, there are much simpler ways to communicate. Slap down some formulas, some mathematical formulas that support your viewpoint, and scientists are going to be able to say, hey, this is a global warming formula. Why has it been made into a crop circle with a bunch of witnesses that saw it occur? That's a message. And so we have to ask that. We look at the Drake equation and how, outside of the possibility that not that aliens exist, but they would show up here and interact with us. Those are things that have to be, you have to put those on the table. We can't just say, well, we don't understand, because that's another logical fallacy, that if it's too complicated and I can't understand it, therefore it must not be true, or by default, it must be true if I can't understand it. That is another one of them darn logical fallacies that we have to consider when we're looking at stuff. Now, like I said, I study esoteric ideas and thoughts and the way people tell tales and stories to each other, which is far more interesting to me than whether or not the story itself is true. I've talked about vampires, I've talked about werewolves, I've talked about Book of Mormon geography, I've talked about lots of esoteric, hidden sorts of things that probably, in the sense of a scientific validation, would not be true, but are absolutely real in that people tell those stories, they tell those tales, and that is a part of humanity that I think is most fascinating, and why I think this stuff is so interesting. And this idea of crop circles, because it's a very recent phenomenon. It's not like vampires where it goes way back into the mists of time. We can look back into the early 80s and see this actually becoming a phenomenon in the modern world. And we can follow how the media tells the tale, and how the individuals, tell the tale to each other. Another interesting story that goes along with this, and I'll have to pull up the information because I'm kind of shooting from the hip here, but there is a modern story that does the same thing. Gives us an example to look at how a tale is told and how it gets carried on into the uber mind of people. And that's the Bigfoot story. That we have this very famous video, the Patterson tape, of this creature walking across a forest meadow. And a lot of work has been done on this film, stabilizing it and making it, watchable and clearer, and that sort of thing. Interestingly enough, this story, we have Bigfoot, and we have Bigfoot everywhere. That really, there was always, prior to this Patterson film, There was lots of, the concept of Bigfoot or of this Sasquatch, as the Native Americans call it. They just basically took this idea and it just made it kind of like Kevin Arnold's view when he said he saw disc-shaped flying objects following his plane. It just took off in the popular mind. And this is what this Patterson film has had the same impact, is that it was put out there by Mr. Patterson, who wrote a book that Do Abominable Snowmen Live in North America, or Do Abominable Snowmen of America Really Exist? A self-published book. And he tells the story about how he made this and got this film made. And it's a very in-depth story. When Mr. Patterson died, he came clean to his family in a deathbed confession that he had made the film as a hoax, and that he wanted to get it off his chest. Some people debunk that, in that, there's some questions about whether or not it was an actual deathbed confession or something that somebody made up. I mean, the controversy just never ends. But what is interesting is that how the story goes from this simple event to a worldwide phenomenon. And we'll come back and talk some more.
The sun's finally out, so get out there and enjoy. And don't forget to bring along the refreshing sound of K-Talk Media, 1640 AM.
The essence of sales is transferring enthusiasm to the customer. K-Talk Media is looking for people who have an unabashed enthusiasm for live local radio and who would love to share the message of our station with businesses who would like to tap into our large, loyal audience. Do you want a fun, energetic, and rewarding position with a company that makes a difference? Then join our team and feel the love. Full, part-time, or anytime positions available with great compensation. Call us today, 801-253-4883, 801-253-4883, or go to ktalkmedia.com and shoot us a message.
Did you know that at least 50% of women and 30% of men are wearing the wrong size shoe? Have you ever thought to yourself, I love the style, but I definitely can't wear these shoes all day? Do you find yourself in that constant internal argument between style, comfort, and fit? SAS Shoes at 8922 South, State Street in Sandy understands how important a really well-made pair of shoes can be. And this family-owned American company has a dedication to quality and detail that ensures that no matter the SAS shoes you choose, they will be the best made, best fitting, and most comfortable pair of footwear in your closet. Come see us at 8922 South, State Street in Sandy. You know you need a new pair of shoes, and now they're more affordable. SAS on the corner of 90th South State Street, open Monday through Saturday, 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. Come in to feel how comfortable a new pair of shoes can be.
Welcome back to the Dr. Grimmy Old Time Medicine Show and Conversation Extravaganza. We've been talking about crop circles, a little bit of logical fallacy thrown in just to keep it spicy, and we kind of bounced over into Bigfoot a little bit, primarily because I think the way people have told stories and this connection between the events in England in the mid-'80s, the early 80s, and in the early 60s in northwest United States have some very profound similarities in that the same kind of events occurred. You had a group of believers who said that there is UFOs are creating crop circles, or there is a ape-like hominid living in the northwest of the United States, and it getting caught up by the media, and that lots of people come in involved either before or against, or with a different stream of belief than perhaps was initiated by the original event. One of the interesting aspects is that in both stories, we have in the crop circle story, we have the Doug and Dave gentlemen who claimed that they had been making crop circles since 1978 up to 1982. Made them at night, used a board and some rope and a string, and had been doing it just for fun, just to watch the reaction in the press and the people and the buffoons, as they kind of thought they were, these seriologists that were proclaimed experts on crop circles. And, they said, well, it's a weather phenomenon, so that Doug and Dave would make them more complicated to force them to come up with a different explanation. We find a similar event in the Bigfoot mythos, in that after the Patterson film, you have the same sort of thing happen. You have a great deal of interest, a media report, and then lots of sightings of Bigfoot in the woods. And then lots of people come out of the woodwork, the Bigfootologists, the Bigfootists, if you will. And they do the same thing. They all have different trains of belief, different trains of thought. And we have, people who've come forward and stated that this was a hoax and that this didn't happen. I was the one wearing a suit. I was the one doing the film, et cetera, et cetera. And we hit the same event. The same events happen in that, okay, it was a hoax, but Bigfoot is legitimate. Or, okay, Doug and Dave were hoaxers, but there is a legitimate cause for crop circles. The demonstration between these two phenomena, these two things, demonstrates some of the way that human beings tell stories and grab onto a belief system and create a framework. In neither of these arguments, in spite of their best efforts, does full, solid argument apply. And that is to the detriment of whether or not we want to give the artists who are creating this stuff credit, or whether we want to look at scientists and say, well, they just won't believe anything unless they can, put it in a museum. I think what's more important about these two types of stories is how we as people have belief. And we can learn a lot about how we have belief. I mean, if you remember in what year was it? The Orson Welles UFO story where the Mars invaded, and it created a panic because it was done in a kind of a reality show format, to use the terminology, that it was actually happening, and people believed, just like we believe what we read on the internet today. And of course, everything is true on the internet. Just ask Abraham Lincoln. He has an account on Facebook, and everybody believed what they were hearing on the radio. And we didn't have healthy skepticism because we didn't have the ability really to use rational argument when presented with a premise that was outside of what we would normally expect. And I would argue that this is valid for politics. It's valid for anything, that we learn how to look at an argument, have an argument. When I say argument, I'm not talking about rolling around on the ground or calling each other names. None of those are valid methods of arguing, perhaps. But this idea of having a premise and evidence, and not using some of the logical fallacies that I've talked about today as an example of what has happened, particularly in the crop circle phenomenon. And I said I just kind of bumped into the Bigfoot story as train of thought took me there. but that we don't use logical fallacy. We don't use ad hominem attacks. We don't attack people. We look at their argument. We don't use thinking that is unsound, such as the thinking of if this, then that. Logical fallacy, if UFOs are seen around where crop circles are made, therefore UFOs and crop circles are related. That is a logical fallacy. That is not a way, that's not based, it doesn't have any evidence. It's just it's a flawed way of thinking. And if I made your head explode, put it in a cup, pull over, put it back in, you're going to be just fine. We really have to be careful because these things matter. How we find truth in the world matters, and it's okay to find things to not be true. It doesn't mean, your feel-bads don't have to be hurt. If you believe in a phenomenon such as crop circles or Bigfoot or something, and let's say that the evidence is just overwhelming that it cannot be claimed to be true, you have to be willing and open-minded enough to change your way of looking at the world for evidence, because that's how we grow and become stronger and better as a species, as a human family. We start making good decisions. Science matters. I want scientists to look at the medicines that I'm taking and give me data that says, yes, they work under these conditions, or no, they don't work under these conditions. I think the way we find truth can be outside of science, because there is truths that can be found without using a scientific method. But those truths that we find not using a scientific method only apply to the individual themselves that finds them. Spiritual truth, which is primarily the kind of truth we find that is not found by scientific method, that truth is just as valid as any other truth, but it is valid for the individual themselves. And so I can say to you, I have a truth that I believe, but it is true for me if I can't give you physical evidence that demonstrates that truth in a scientific manner. I can't claim it to be scientific. I have to claim it to be something else. It doesn't mean it's any less valid, but I have to be true about what it is. So if I've determined the truth about something using my own thinking and my own heart and my own practice, then those things are true for me, but they don't apply to anybody else but me. Now, they may be universal. Telling the truth is universal, and I think the divine is universal, but how we come to that understanding is individual. And we all have to come to that understanding individually. And there are ways to do that are common, but I can't do them for you. You can't look at me and say, well, you did it, so then I don't have to do anything else. In the spiritual world, for finding spiritual truth, which I think we're looking for when we do these kinds of things, when we look at crop circles, when we look at Bigfoot, we're truly looking for some truths that are bigger and greater than ourselves, which is the definition of spiritual truth. And I think that to find that, we have to find it for ourselves, and we can follow mentors who have done it, but the results are our own. Scientific truth is equally as valid, and we must rely on it as well, because whenever you get into an airplane to fly, you're doing something that is scientifically valid. It's been tested and proven to be true consistently. And so you can't argue that science doesn't apply and then get on an airplane. You can't argue that how we purify water. Scientists tested water and found out that there were things in it that could hurt us and that they could be removed by certain things, and they tested that theory consistently over time, and we were able to find that clean water was better for us, and we knew how to make clean water, and we did it. And our lives have gotten better because of science. So let's not throw science out with the bathwater, because our use of logical fallacy leads us to find truths that are on sand and not rock. And just because something feels good does not mean it is true. Let me disabuse you of that notion right now. Just because it feels good doesn't mean it's true. And if you think that's the measure of truth, your life's going to end up pretty miserable. That's all I can say. because any truth that, if you think anything that feels good is usually going to kill me. I like the idea of pleasure, and if a little bit's good, a lot's better. So I have to rationally look at the world and make decisions with some hope that I can find physical truth, if not spiritual truth. I hope that this helps. I hope that we can all look at our world and find a way to find truth that matters. You know, and I think that's going to start with, at least in a community, you know, learning how to make a rhetorical discussion, you know, with a premise and with evidence, and not with emotion. Because we do that. We say, well, if I get more angry, I'm more right. And you see that in today's media. You see that in the news. You see it in politics. And the reality is that we rarely get good thought from those kinds of behaviors. I am a champion of reason. I am a child of the Enlightenment. I'm not very bright, but I hope to use bright thought. I hope that I can be useful in that regard, and I hope that we can have fun talking about things that may not be true, but they're certainly interesting, and we can have fun doing it. I'm grateful for the opportunity, and I hope you guys, when you look out in the world and you can ask yourself those questions, when somebody makes a claim, what is their evidence? You know, why are they making these claims? Does it stand up? Can I test the claim that they're making by some measure? And if I can, and I can show them that their claim perhaps is built on sand instead of rock, let's be willing, if somebody disproves our value, that since it's not based on feeling, it's based on reason, we can adjust without being angry or hurtful, and we can both walk to the light of reason. There is something to be said for that. I hope that we can do both. We can find spiritual truth as well, with the idea that it is our own that we are looking for, not something for everybody else. We've had a lot of fun. Crop circles are interesting, and I've learned more about them than I ever really wanted to know, and had a good time doing it. You can always get a hold of us, 801-254-1640. We have an online app that you can download to your phone through the App Store. You can listen with your phone by calling 605-475-1429. This is true of all of our shows. Or you can dial into www.ktalkmedia.com and click the listen button. Bear in mind, tomorrow's Father's Day. Remember that. We do have a contest. Get on our website, click the Enter to Win button, and then you can maybe win something. I got some Kindle Fires, some Herbs for Health, and a stay at the Spring Hill Suites Marriott. Kate Talk is here to talk, so I'm glad that I was able to do that. And I hope that we can have some more fun next week. I'm here every Saturday, 8 to 10, the Dr. Grimmy's Old Time Medicine Show and Conversation Extravaganza. We talk about stuff that doesn't normally get talked about, and we try to keep it interesting. I don't like to talk politics, but I try to talk, well, at least about something that'll keep you interested. I'm expecting the break to start here any second, but I don't hear it. So I'm going to keep yapping until it starts. Oh, there we go. Finally. The clock on my board is a little bit different, but there you go. End of the show, and I'll see you next week. Thank you for putting up with me, and we'll have some fun next time.